Hello and welcome back to the Hot Lap, the series where I take on a modern motorsports issue very quickly in under 6 minutes, including intro, outro and titles. Yes, this is episode 5. No, I've not done it in under 6 minutes yet. Get off my back, Jill. Don't you have kids to look after? And you join us at our first two-part Hot Lap. Last time I was talking about Ross Brawn and his comments about sprint qualifying, but he was trying to use it to get younger fans into the sport, and Lando Norris followed up by agreeing with him. Now, I talked about my thoughts on those comments in the last video, so link in the description if you want to check it out. But then, in my original recording, I went on to speak about what I think the real issue is for accessibility in Formula 1. Not just for young fans or new fans, but fans in general. And I think it's really important. And that's why I've separated it out into its own hot lap, and we're going to talk about it right now. My name's Ash, this is The Outside Line. So we're about to jump back in time to roughly a week ago when I was mid-rant talking about sprint qualifying, how I don't think that that is the answer for getting young fans into the sport. And I go on to speak about what I think is important for getting fans into the sport, with the exception, of course, of, good on-track racing. That's a given. But this is just as important, I feel. Let's go. And this brings me on to another point of accessibility. The big thing that Ross wants is to make sure the sport is accessible to young people. A very valid concern, because at the end of the day, the sport's popularity isn't guaranteed. You want to keep it popular, of course. The key thing with accessibility is not length of races, it is about access to them. Clues in the name: accessibility, access to races. When I grew up in the 90s, F1 was on free-to-air television, every single race live, and that was on BBC, then on ITV, then back to BBC, whatever. And that was like that for 15-20 years until Sky came along, and then Sky got the rights to show every single race live, but they let half the races stay on free-to-air television, and then that half became all of them apart from the British Grand Prix. The UK, which has long been one of the biggest fan bases for F1, now only has one live race on free-to-air television. Every other race is behind a paywall on a channel that's £18 a month. Like, in some cases, there will not even be any races in said month. But Ash, I hear you say, we're going to add more races. That's stupid too. That's probably another hot lap, but I've got issues with this incredibly compacted calendar. There's 23 races that, regardless of a pandemic, they're determined to have 23 races. Stupid. No. That isn't the issue. The issue is, if you want to make the sport accessible to fans, you need to at least make it more accessible than it currently is. Like, I've never been to a Grand Prix. It's always been too expensive. I've never had the disposable income to do it. But the thing is, I also would never have wanted to go to a Grand Prix if it hadn't been on free-to-air television. I would not have been a fan if, growing up, F1 was only available on a TV channel that was £18 a month. I wouldn't have had it, wouldn't have seen it, it wouldn't have ever crossed my dad's mind to get it. And he was an F1 fan like the 70s and 80s. He would have just watched the highlights because he would have refused to pay it. And while that's probably good enough for someone who's been a long-time fan, watching extended highlights isn't exactly the way to try and get into a new sport. You want to experience it live, you want to feel like you're part of the moment. Having these races behind a paywall, I just think, is one of the stupidest things that F1 could do. The thing is, they are rolling in at the minute because there will be people who pay it, but it's going to hurt them in the long run, and I think it also shows how much respect they have for their fans. They don't care. As long as we'll pay it, they actually don't care. And the only time they will ever put it back on free-to-air television is if we just stop watching it. I mean, we are part of the problem. And don't get me wrong, I am not having a go at Sky's coverage. They do a very, very good job. However, so did Channel 4 and BBC and ITV before them, and there are a couple of key personnel in the Sky lineup who did used to be in the old crews from BBC, ITV, Channel 4. I'm not being funny. There is nothing that Sky Sports F1 are doing now that free-to-air television didn't do, with the exception of, obviously, because they've got their own channel, they could devote a bit more airtime to it or show the testing. But honestly, what gets presented to me on Sky versus what used to get presented to me on Channel 4 and BBC, the difference ain't £18 a month. What is an even bigger kick in the teeth is that in territories outside the UK, you can get F1 TV Pro and watch the races live on the world feed for £10 a month. Almost half the price. Like, thank you for treating one of your most loyal fan bases throughout the years like this, to let us not have access to that service. Also, again, they're doing that to try and get new fans in other countries. Oh, it's only £10 a month. If it's a product they're not into, they're not going to spend £10 a month. It needs to be on free-to-air there as well. One of the reasons Formula E has grown so well so quickly is accessibility to the races and good marketing. If it wasn't for the fact that the Season 5 races of Formula E used to be on YouTube Live, wouldn't have been into it as much now. I started watching because of live, free racing. Liked what I saw, kept watching. It's no longer on YouTube, but it is still on free-to-air access in this country on the BBC, which means I can continue to be a fan. If you suddenly put Formula E behind the £10 paywall, no. I don't know what the answer to this is, because, F1 fans who watch long enough will obviously, they can afford to, pay, or, F1 is perfectly happy for people who can't afford it to just watch highlights. And again, that's not having a go at Channel 4, they do a great job as well. It is just the whole point of seeing the race live as it happens. And the thing is, because we live in such a connected world, chances are by the time you come to sit down and watch the highlights of the race, you already know who's won. To be fair, in this era, you probably already know who's won anyway, but that's besides the point. If you're worried about accessibility to younger fans, make the sport more accessible on free-to-air television. I'm not saying you're going to suddenly give all of the races back free-to-air so people don't watch Sky, but more than just the British Grand Prix. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I've been watching the sport for a while, and I was lucky to grow up having it on free-to-air television. And even though it's been on Sky for quite a few years now, and like I say, they do a good job, and I'm able to access it on Sky as well. I'm lucky. Not many people are. And I realise that by paying for Sky, I'm also part of the problem. I'd love to know your thoughts on this about, is it a big deal? Is it, important that it's not on free-to-air television? Because I still think it is, even though I can watch the races. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this. Really interesting, and it'd be great to get a picture from fans, young and old, because I am just one voice, it is just my opinion. Like I say, other opinions are available. I'm going to leave it there for today. I already know that's not going to be under 6 minutes, because I have ranted heavily, but, one day, because I ramble on and kind of go off on little tangents, maybe I just need to pick a really super simple topic if I want to get it under 6 minutes, like the core basic stuff. Today we're talking about, do you like Nikita Mazepin? I do not actually, he's a tool. Great stuff, see you next time!